We're looking at figure 3.8 in your textbook on page 60. So this figure tries to explain the equimarginal principle, which is an extremely important principle, and we're going to use it in future learning units as well. I'm going to explain it with the aid of an example. So I'm going to, from the beginning, sketch this scenario in which we are, and through that I'm going to explain you how the equimarginal principle works. Right, so first of all, let's just give you some background. Let's say you have a company that produces chairs, right? Let's call your company Chairs Company, right? Now you have two factories producing chairs, Factory A and Factory B. Now Factory A, we want to look at its marginal cost. So we're going to write the cost on this curve, the vertical axis, 0 over here, and then we're going to write quantity. I'm going to put a little A down there to show the quantity produced Factory A. Now you have this factory for a long time, so it's a bit outdated, the technology, right? Which means basically that older technology allows you to produce something cheap initially, but then the cost of producing it increases quickly. So what I show you is my marginal cost curve. So initially, to produce a unit is quite cheap, but then if I produce one more, the cost increase quite quickly, drastically. So it's a very steep curve, right? On the other side is Factory B. Now Factory B you purchased, let's say, very recently. So the technology is brand new. And this allows you to initially maybe pay a lot or a bit more to produce, but then the curve doesn't really increase that much, right? So it's a very flat curve. Now you might say you don't understand why an old factory has this type of curve and a new factory a flat curve. That's not important. What's important is that you have two factories and their marginal cost curve looks different. Okay, they have unique features. The one is initially cheap, but then cost increases quickly. The other it's initially a bit more expensive, but then cost does not increase quickly, right? So that's the idea, is that they are different. Now you get an order in, right? An order for 100 chairs. Now the aim of the game when you have a company is obviously to produce these chairs at the absolute minimum cost. So your main aim is to minimize total cost, right, of the 100 chairs. So now the question is, how are you going to produce these 100 chairs? Are you going to produce everything in Factory A? It's 100 over here somewhere. No, you can have extremely high, it's not even on the graph, high cost. Are you going to produce everything in Factory? Oh, you could, because it's quite cheap, but then you miss this initial cheap marginal cost of Factory A, right? So just want to take that away. So how are you going to produce it? Now one option is, let's split it 50-50. Let's produce 50 chairs in Factory B and 50 chairs in Factory A. Let me just get my graph neat. I'm going to start this side. So let's say that's about 50 chairs, right? And that's a cost of $12. If I produce 50 chairs in Factory B, that's about, let's say, $8. All right, that's not too bad. Meaning the cost of producing 50 chairs in Factory A is $12 per chair. Gives me a total of $600. The cost of producing 50 chairs in Factory B is $8 per chair and gives me $400. So can you see when I split it 50-50, I get a total cost of $1,000. That's interesting. Well, now you say, maybe we can do this a little bit cheaper, right? Maybe we can move some of the production from factory A to factory B. Why? Because currently we're paying a lot more to produce half of the chairs at factory A than at factory B. So if we move some of the production from A to B, we might lower the total cost. And that is exactly what the equimarginal principle is all about. The equimarginal principle says if you move production from the factory with a high marginal cost to the factory with a lower marginal cost until the marginal costs are even, then you will minimize total cost. So if I move it over here, right, until my marginal costs are even, let's say $9. Now I'm producing, this is also $9. Now I'm producing a lot at factory B. This is 62, so it's 62. And I'm producing little at factory A, let's say this 38. Then I will minimize my total costs. Now what is, if I produce 38 chairs here for $9 per chair, then this is, just getting my calculator out for this one, 38 times 9 equals 342. Right, let's take this down, $342. Oops, forgot about the dollar sign. This side I'm producing 62 chairs at a price of $9 per chair, also 9. Why? Because my marginal costs are now the same. Let's get my calculator in here. 62 times $9 equals 558. So what's the total of these two? If I produce that my marginal costs are equal, thus not splitting it half between the two, then my total cost is $900. Can you see this one is a lot lower than this one? Why? Because I didn't divide the quantity I produce in each factory equally. I divided it in such a way that my equal marginal costs are the same, and then my total costs would be minimized. So what have we learned from this experience? We said the equimarginal principle means if I ensure that, in this case, marginal costs are, can you see the word equal is almost over here, is equal in both factories, then my total cost would be at a minimum. And that's the whole point of this. We want to minimize total cost. How do we do that? By dividing the production between the two factories in such a way that the marginal cost of producing at factory B is equal to the marginal cost of producing at factory A. And that is your equimarginal principle. We use the equimarginal principle for other things as well. So don't think this is only applicable on costs. You'll see in future study units it's also applicable on a wide range of other things. But what's important is that the marginal entity is equal, then the total entity, in this case, will be minimized. In some cases, will even be maximized.